2 daughters. I officially, this week, have 2 teenagers in my house, which is insane. How do you express all of this to your children? How can we use this language of the body as a frame for them?
Welcome to the Be Filled podcast. Together, we will explore the deepest desires of the human heart and how our Creator wants to fulfill your every longing. Join us as we explore the beautiful teaching of St. Pope John Paul II on the theology of the body. We are so excited you're here on the journey with us. Open your heart to be filled.
Hello, and welcome to a new season of the Be Filled podcast. It's so exciting. My name is Rochelle Parker, and I'm here with my beautiful friends, Katie Davis and Patty Strauss. And we are so excited to get back to our study of St. Pope John Paul II's teaching on theology of the body after a little bit of a break, if you're following along with us in real time. It has been an incredible journey, and we still have, we're at the end, actually, of the text, but we have a lot still to talk about, so it's going to be so great. This episode, we're beginning chapter 2 of part 2 in the text, which is entitled The Dimension of the Sign. And this chapter includes 16 audiences. They were originally delivered between January 5th, 1983 and July 4th, 1984. What were you guys doing in 83 and 84?
I was in grade school. No, I was in high school.
I was going to say.
I was in high school.
Were you, Patty? Because I was in grade school.
Yeah, I graduated in 85, so.
Now we're aging ourselves.
Aren't we?
I guess that's probably not a good
As
thing.
it is.
Yes, but, we were here. We were around. In this chapter, we're going to explore with John Paul II what the Sacrament of Marriage looks like on the ground, right? In our actual lives, as a sign. How do we live out this sign of Christ's love for the church? And what does marriage look like in reality when we're living out the spousal meaning of our bodies? Mm-hmm. So, yeah, we got a lot to talk about. So in audiences 103 to 105, John Paul II begins to develop the concept of the language of the body. And he begins by looking at the vows that the engaged couple speaks on their wedding day. And he writes that the words, "I take you as my wife," or as my husband, "and I promise to be faithful to you always, in joy and in sorrow, in sickness and in health, and to love you and honor you all the days of my life," that those words express the couple's readiness to become one flesh and signify who, quote, "both have decided to be from now on for and with one another." So just like every sacrament in the church, you've got a form and then you have the matter, right? So with marriage, the vows are the form of the sacrament of marriage, and our bodies, the bodies of the husband and wife, are the matter. And so the vows are kind of only part of this commitment that you're making. The marriage is not complete until the two become one flesh. And that is through the language of their bodies, they fulfill the words that have been spoken in the liturgy. So the marriage vows are, of course, not just lived out through that conjugal union, but through the entirety of their lives and all the circumstances that they find themselves in along the way. So it's in the way that they live out this reciprocal gift of self and the communion of persons that really makes the marriage a sign of Christ's love and his grace to the world. And then John Paul II goes on to talk about how the prophets of the Old Testament help us to see the prophetism of the body as well. And he explains that when the prophets write about the covenant God made with Israel, they portray it as marriage, and we've talked about this before as an analogy. But it's God who initiates this covenant, and he says that the bond is deeply personal. Israel is the bride, and Yahweh is the bridegroom. So when Israel breaks the covenant with God, they're not just breaking the law. They are being unfaithful and even betraying the Lord as though they were adulterers in a marriage. And John Paul II describes this as a blow that directly pierces his heart as Father, Bridegroom, and Lord. I thought that was a really powerful quote, very moving. So the objective reality is the covenant made, and the subjective reality is Israel's behavior. Like, are they living out the reality of their marriage covenant or covenant with the Lord? And if they are, then they're living in the truth, right? But if they're turning away from him in their behavior, they're living a lie. So in the same way, when we enter into the sacrament of marriage, we can either live in a way that speaks the truth of the commitment that we have made to each other, or we can live in a way that does not speak the truth. And John Paul II writes that human beings, male or female, bride or bridegroom, with the vocation to the communion of persons, speak a language with the body. He goes on to write that in order to fully express the deepest words of the Spirit, words of love, gift, and faithfulness, we must speak with the body. Okay, so ladies, I can't wait to hear your reflections on these first couple audience. What really moved you, and what do you think this looks like in our lives? Katie, what were your thoughts?
Well, I think when he's talking about, he uses the words like marriage is a visible and efficacious sign. And so, like, when he is describing efficacious, that means that it has meaning, it has real power with it, and there's grace with it. Okay, so then, like, fast forward, he's talking about that prophetic meaning, right? So prophetic meaning truth. We're speaking truth here. So I thought about one thing that Christopher West says in his course, and he talks about this prophetic truth our body speaks, just even with the systems within our body, and how the reproductive system is actually the only system, have you guys heard this? The only system that makes no sense on its own. So your digestive system, your cardiovascular system, they all operate within your body on their own most of the time, right? And so the reproductive system, though, is almost like a prophetic sign in itself. It makes no sense by itself. In fact, sometimes when you don't see that it has a purpose at all, some women just want to remove it completely because it can almost be a burden on its own, right? And so, like, just looking at, like, the reproductive system needs another person in order to be used properly and in order to make sense. And that is the same truth that's being described from the very beginning with original unity, right? So the prophetism, or the language of the body, speaks a truth that we are made for each other. So when Adam was by himself, he knew he wasn't complete, right? He's like, wait, one part of my body doesn't work.
Right? Yeah.
What is that? Why did God give me this reproductive system? It's not working. Everything else is working, so what's wrong? So we make no sense alone is the message that's being portrayed from this reality. So we're made to give and to receive. We're made for a very intimate and sacred union with our spouse. And this image is the union, right, that God wants with us as our beloved. So what does this look like? Bill Donahue described in his commentary on Audience 104 that sometimes we can get caught up in, like, the contractual thinking of, like, okay, we do good things, we earn points for getting those good things, the top 25% gets into heaven, God opens, okay, you're in, whoop, didn't earn enough points, you're out. And so that is not what is being described here, right? And so God is just desiring that union with us. He's not desiring a contract with us. So he wants us to feel this deeply personal, sacred bond. He's not your taskmaster. He doesn't want your blind obedience. He wants your heart. And so when we're looking at the heart, again, as Rochelle, you outlined so well, like, sin is like committing adultery. It's the unfaithfulness. So, for example, in your marriage vows, when you say, are you willing to accept children lovingly from God? When your language says yes, But then your body, after you're married, says, no, I do not want every part of what I said yes with, then you're really not being faithful. And so God created the body to speak through actions in addition to the words. We all do not like hypocrites, right? And so the body will proclaim its truth on its own, but we have to let those actions meet the words. And so I think that's why there is the two. There is the vows and there is the consummation. And the commentary, there's a gray box on page 464, and I thought it was beautiful on relating how, like, the vows and consummation in marriage can show up with Christ as well. So this is Saint Bonaventure, and he offered this reflection on the exchange of vows and consummation in marriage. So he taught that in the moment of consent, when spouses commit their will to marriage, they are with Christ in his agony in the garden, right? Because he does ask, right? If you don't need to do it this way, I'm good. You're good. Oh, okay. So he gave his consent there verbally, but then Christ committed his will, giving himself up for his bride, and in the moment of consummation, the spouses are with Christ on the cross. So they're living out what they said earlier, just as Christ lived out what he submitted to in the garden. And so that is what they're committing to at the altar, lived out in the consummation. So I just thought, such a beautiful thing to reflect on, and something we can reflect on all the time. And so Brent and I are reading this book called 3 Secrets to Holiness in Marriage. And it's actually written by a Catholic couple, and they're talking about their marriage preparation. Their priest was telling them kind of about this. And he said, the words of consecration that you hear every weekend at Mass are the words of your marriage vows. And so he meant by this is that during the consecration, the priest speaks the words, take this, all of you, and eat it, for this is my body, which will be given up for you. And this is like exactly the language of love of Christ, like giving himself. And he uses this language with his bride before he gives a complete gift of himself or her. And so Jesus freely offers all of himself to his beloved, just as during the vows, right? They're offering all of themselves. So they actually, every Mass, hold hands during this part of the consecration as part of that reminder that they're like imaging exactly what's happening up on the altar. So I thought that was a beautiful reminder every time you go with your husband. Now my husband and I are like, our kids never let us sit together. We're never going to be
we always end up apart too.
You can get that
beautiful.
look.
Yeah, we do a wing.
What's the name of the book? Do you have that? And
yes,
we can
it's
share
called, let's see, 3 Secrets to Holiness in Marriage. It's a 33-day consecration for your marriage. It's really pretty.
Do you happen to know the authors?
I don't know their
Okay,
names.
we'll look it up.
Yeah.
I'll put a link. I'll find it, or you can find it. and
Yes.
Thank you. That was beautiful. Wow.
It really is. Sometimes when we're doing this podcast, I
love
hear
that.
things that I'm like, now that's going to change my life.
I know.
I really appreciate
No,
that
that's
so much.
Beautiful.
And that was part of even in my reflection too, was something that happened in my life, kind of concerning actually the readings that we're doing. And I was going to kind of go through that. It was something that happened. So I've been married 36 years, so a long time. And but before I go into that, I was just going to say that I'm actually teaching a Theology of the Body class for 7th graders for Confirmation 1. And we're using an Ascension Press book called Envision. And it's actually really good. They continue to look at our culture. They continue to interview kids and just kind of look at the environment and to try to get this language to the children. And so yesterday's class was actually on the language of the body. So it was neat to go through these notes and to hear that how they're then putting that forward to the 7th graders. And it reminded me when we first started to come together to talk about theology of the body, and we would bring parents together together. And as we were talking about the power of the language, and how that informs us and helps us live at another level, to hear God, see God, we through the veil of theology of the body. And so many of the adults would say, if I had only had this language before. Yeah. So again, we're continuing to talk about that, what we understand in our heart, but we can't really pull that fully out, which is, we just keep going over and over that. So we spent some time, so psychologists have said that the 90% of the language that we speak when we're talking to each other is the unspoken language. And so of the body. And so we spent time with the kids last night just having them do a series of expressions without language, and they were laughing. And it was really hard. There were some things to show, like show lonely when you're standing there by yourself, but yet you can read lonely when you walk in and you see someone sitting there, lonely. And so it just really helped them to see that they know this. They know that the language of the body is very powerful. And so in this section, we were talking about the truth that our bodies give and the lies that our bodies give. So I just thought it was really interesting to have the kids start to look around right now when they're young, because then these things will make more sense to them. So as I was going through, again, we teach natural family planning, and we've been teaching that for almost 30 years. But when I got married 36 years ago, we practiced a form of natural family planning that didn't have theology in it. It just had the way to space and limit your children. So actually looking back on that, I'm glad that I had 6 years of practicing a method, but then when the language of the church was given to me, how it transformed me. So in our teaching notes, it says every marital act is actually a renewal of the marriage covenant. And again, covenant is not just a promise, right? It's like the whole, you're all in. Yeah. And so that changed everything for me. So we had a couple of kids before we started to learn this form of natural family planning that had the language of the church in it. And before that, I felt John and I were in control. So we want our children spaced this far apart, and I was in control. But there was something about that concept of that, what are we doing with our bodies when in our truth of who we are to each other. It was transformative to recognize that every time that we had those relations, we're renewing our marriage covenant, and it helped me love John deeper. It took it to a whole different level. It helped even with teaching the class, because I had this deeper understanding. I could hear how Christ was moving within us. And so in the book, again, there was more language. So studying this helped me understand that even deeper. Why did that resonate so much with me? Why did then I feel more open to letting God choose when our children were going to come, to pay attention to what was going on in John and my life, that, at this point we need to abstain, but then the very next month, no, God's calling us now to try to procreate with him. And so it was just helped us live a more mature marriage. So then as I was going through this, I actually wanted to, because I cannot say the words like John Paul II. So I went through the commentary and just pulled out some things that I thought were very important. So John Paul said, the visible reality of marriage, which is the human dimension, symbolizes and affects the invisible mystery, which is the divine dimension of grace. So I sat with that for a time, because it is part of what happened was we were practicing the body language of spacing or limiting. But when we brought in the divine language of what we're doing with that, it changed everything. Mm-hmm. So the truth of the body is meant to be expressed through the body's language. A man is in some sense unable to express the singular language of the personal existence and vocation without the body, which, Katie, is what you had said so well. When we look around, it doesn't make sense when we're separate from each other. I had used a similar thing. There is a book that that Christopher West wrote called Eclipse of the Body, and it actually goes through this. And it's a very small book. I would recommend you grabbing it somewhere just to kind of, again, get the language to talk to people about these things that are written in our heart. It helps to have read this book to be able to talk to my teenagers and to others.
It's the first book you gave me.
You remember? because it impacted me so much. But in that, it's like as if an alien is coming to the world and he's looking at these creatures and he sees, kind of like you said, our respiratory works, our digestive works. But what is this? It takes two of us to make the genitals, which is made for generation. And what is that and the power of that language? So then another part of the commentary is the deepest words of the Spirit, words of love, gift, and faithfulness, call for an appropriate language of the body. Without the language of the body, they cannot be fully expressed. So again, just sitting with that and recognizing that, and on page 464, same page you were on, but not in the gray box, but around the gray box. The words of the wedding vows become flesh. The language inscribed in sexual relations and expressed by those who perform the sexual act is always the language of the wedding vows, which is what you said so well. With the marriage act, we pass to the reality that corresponds to these words. Both are important with regard to the structure of the sacrament. Again, a sacrament is a visible, sacred sign instituted by Christ that both signifies and causes grace, making the invisible divine life present and empowering believers for holiness and union with God. Grace is that life of God within us. And then there's a priest. It just really stunned me. So Father Ripperger is a teaching exorcist, and he was speaking on this greatness of marriage. And he actually brought out, and I don't know why this is so meaningful, see how this pulls you, but that the angels are present when we're consummating our marriage. That it's so sacred and so holy that's part, the heaven looks at that is a very special way. The sacramental sign of marriage is expressed through the language of the irrevocable self-loving of man and woman to each other. The language of the spirit of the heart, will, and intellect have a corresponding language of the body. All married life is a gift, but this becomes most evident when the spouses, in giving themselves to each other in love, bring about the encounter which makes them one flesh. Just as the body is the visible sign of a person's soul, the one body that spouses become serves in some way is the visible sign of their marriage's soul. So if we turn the whole of married life into a sign, we might say that the conjugal intercourse is a sign of that sign. So it's just that we can go deeper and deeper of the visible and the invisible, the human and the divine. So that the sign of a spousal union has become a sign of marriage as a sacrament. And then this weekend I was able to watch, we went to a class and the woman was supposed to teach, but they had an infant, so the husband was taking the baby, but the baby really was teething and needed the mom. But and so I had my daughters with me and we were watching. We didn't know this couple at all, but they were teaching. But how the man and the woman, you could tell how strong they were in their marriage, how they just kind of organically passed the child, how they were living out their marriage vows. And what spoke to me is it was truth. It was truth in how they loved the baby. And, one would sacrifice the other. Okay, well, I'm going to take the baby because the baby needs me in this way. And the husband would step in. And with the way they looked at each other, the way they talked, we see this in our society all the time. If we look around, the congruence of a truth lived in our marriages.
It's beautiful. Wow, so good. I have so many things to sit with now from both of you. That was
I need to sit with the marriage's soul. I'm like, I never thought about that.
What you just said, Patty, about, and I haven't said very much about contraception yet, because we are going to. I mean, it's hard to not talk about it, but we're going to get there, like really. But what you just said triggered something though about that the angels are present and all of that. It just occurred to me that, like, using contraception and having that mentality is not just about the act of taking that pill or whatever you're doing. Okay, it's more like the attitude. What am I saying when I'm doing that? What I'm saying is, this belongs to me to manage and control. It doesn't belong to you, my spouse. And what you said made me realize also, you're saying this doesn't belong to God either. Like I'm cutting him off. I'm acting through my language like he is not involved, or maybe he can't even see me at all. Like he's not even interested, really. But I will say, as someone who I didn't grow up knowing any of this, and so like, you're just not even thinking about that at all. Like, you're kind of taught that this is the responsible thing to do. This is what adults do, like when you get married, because it is responsible to manage. Yeah, it's responsible to manage this. So just know, if you're listening and you are not Catholic, or this is new to you or whatever, I totally get it, because same. But yeah, when you start thinking about it in terms of like, what am I saying though with my actions? What am I saying to my spouse? What am I saying to God? You know, like, it's a closing. It's such a closing in so many ways. So thank you for sharing. That was like super powerful. I did have a couple thoughts. Like, I was thinking about, there was one quote that a couple words stuck out to me that I thought I would share. So this is Audience 103. He says, John Paul II says, the persons, the man and the woman, become a reciprocal gift for each other. They become this gift, was the key word that stuck out to me. They become this gift in their masculinity and femininity while they discover the spousal meaning of the body and the dimension of life as a whole. So those words, become and discover, like really popped out at me, because I was thinking, like, it's not like you get married and you just know all these things. Like, it is a journey. It is something that we learn as we walk together. It's a deepening that happens over time. And I think my husband is amazing, of course. And I feel like even before we got married, or I don't know at what point, he started saying, like, we would say, I love you. And he would say, more today than yesterday, or he would write that in a card, you know, like more today than yesterday. And he'd always be like, that's amazing. Like, how is that possible that I would love you more today than yesterday? But it's because of just walking through life. You share all these joys and sorrows, and you know each other more and more deeply, and you're able to give yourselves to each other in such a variety of ways and in circumstances, you know, beyond the, you know, conjugal union, of course, like just in life. You know, you're just getting deeper all the time.
Deep sea diving.
Yeah, exactly. I feel like that has come up before, perhaps. So. Anyway, but that, with him saying more today than yesterday, just popped in my head. I was like, but that's so true. It is amazing how that works. But
I know.
And then I also was thinking about the analogy given by the prophets, and how, like, I remember in the beginning of the podcast, we talked about how, you know, before we just had Adam, and we talked about the original solitude, and how every person has this unique and unrepeatable relationship with God, like this unique and unrepeatable bond with the Lord. And in the same way, in our marriages, every single marriage is unique and unrepeatable. And there's never been another couple like, you know, you guys and your husbands, like, ever, and there never will be. So you have like this unique mission in the world as well that cannot be repeated. And so that just kind of popped in my head, and I thought, well, that's really cool. And then I had one more thing. I was actually struggling a lot with this reading, and like, what does this all mean and how does it apply? But then I started thinking, I'm glad you are teaching the middle school kids. I just started thinking, you know, I have 2 daughters. I officially, like, this week have 2 teenagers in my house, which is insane. But I'm just thinking and praying about, like, how do you express all of this to your children? Like, as they are getting to ages where they're noticing boys and they're wanting to date, like, how can we use this language of the body as like a frame for them to like know how I behave at this stage in my life when it comes to relationships with the opposite sex? And I do not have the answers, but it's just something I started kind of like thinking through and like asking myself some questions. So I was thinking about just the importance of your words and your behavior matching the reality of the relationship commitment that you have, or whatever, like, that's appropriate for your age and your stage in life, that those things should match each other. So if they don't match, then there is that danger of like ending up using each other, you know. If you're acting in a way that's actually beyond the actual level of commitment that you have with each other, then like there's something off there. So, you know, I was just thinking like, how would I talk about this? Like, you know, when you're in high school, are you like really ready to marry someone? No. You might think you are.
I know 2 examples.
But you might not be. So how do you speak and act in a relationship so that it isn't speaking a lie? You know, how can I speak the truth in word and action as a young person who is just, the purpose would be, I'm just learning to relate to this other person. I'm just learning like what is important to me, what qualities, you know, what virtues am I looking for in for the future for a spouse. But like right now, I'm just in a stage of like learning and exploring, you know, and kind of just thinking those things through. So also, I was thinking about John Paul II saying that we're unable to fully express love without the body. So if we start speaking in a way or expressing love to someone at too young of an age or too early, then we naturally are stirring desires that are good, like good desires for that union. We're stirring those up, but at the wrong time. Right? And so that's when we can kind of get ourselves into situations where, you know, we get hurt or we hurt someone else, you know, because we're not matching the reality with our words and our bodies. You know what I'm saying? So anyway, I don't know how to do this, guys. Just if you're listening and you're like, that sounds great, Rochelle, what do I do? I don't know. Maybe someone else sitting at this table knows things. But I think, you know, as a parent, it's scary because you're like, you so don't want them to get hurt and you don't want them to repeat the same mistakes you made, because I made plenty. I made plenty of mistakes and I wasn't thinking about what my body was speaking when I was, you know, high school and college. And you could be like, well, just don't date, just no dating. But I'm not sure if that's really the answer either. Like, because I do think there's a lot that can be learned in that time if it's, you know, guided and you can accompany your children down that road. But anyway, what I just want to say to you is, that was for Father Mike, I said that. What I really want to say to you is just pray for me and pray for all of us who are raising teenagers, and we will pray for all of you too. So okay, that was kind of, so a lot more came up than I thought.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
Was going to come out. So I'm hoping that maybe there can be some wisdom about that at some point from someone here. But okay, so we have 2 more audiences to talk about. We have audiences 106 and 107. And this is, John Paul II is just continuing to expand what it means for the couple to, he says, author the language of the body in marriage. Because we are human persons, we have free will and self-determination, and we get to decide what this looks like, right? Like, what does it look like to speak the truth? So the man and woman choose freely to live out their wedding vows in the many and complex ways they're called to do so in marriage. And John Paul II writes that the couple, through their conduct and behavior, actions and gestures, are called to become the authors of these meanings of the language of the body, from which they then build and continually deepen love, faithfulness, conjugal integrity, and the union that remains indissoluble until death. So this is how each of them live in the truth in their marriage, or conversely, live a lie in their marriage. So through marriage, we're also called to bear witness to a spousal and procreative love by correctly using the language of the body. So, I mean, it is bigger than us. It's not just my personal decision or my husband's personal decision or even us as a couple necessarily. Like, how we live out our marital vows directly impacts not only our marriage, our family, our children, and our witness to the world of Christ's love. So that's a lot. Like it really actually matters. Thankfully, we have a lot of grace that goes along with the sacrament, obviously, to be able to do that. And then John Paul II addresses the reality of our concupiscence, right? That we do struggle to really live this out in our everyday lives. And he reminds us that we are called. Remember when we studied about Jesus' words in the Sermon on the Mount, that you could think that Jesus is accusing us, right, of concupiscence and lust. But no, he's calling us. He's calling us higher, that we are made for more than what we might naturally gravitate to lust and to selfishness. And he writes that while mistakes will be made along the way, we are always able to cross from error to truth. Thank goodness. It's never too late ever to begin living out the truth with your body in marriage. I mean, there are so many of us who didn't know this before and had to like admit, that was not the right way to live this out, and I'm going to correct, and I'm going to go a different way. But just know, if that's you, that it's okay. Like, there's always time, there's always room for God to change your heart and to open you up to the way he wants you to live out your marriage. So he says, God's love and grace is super abundant to us as we go on this journey. Thank goodness. And he makes it possible for us to live out our vows, those vows again, to be faithful in joy and in sorrow, in sickness and health, and to love and honor our spouses all the days of our life, even in our kind of both and state of being fallen and redeemed. So there you go, ladies.
Okay.
Patty, I would love to hear your thoughts.
Again, going back to what I was teaching yesterday, how it kind of all ties in. So through Ascension Press, when they want you to teach for them, they do all the studies again, what's going on in the culture, and then they want to teach the teachers kind of what is a way to be good at listening, and how do we use our language to, we've all keep saying, we didn't know this before, and our hope in talking about this and diving in, that it opens our hearts and our minds to this language that can change how our young people are looking at the culture. What it said in the training is that there's this huge thing and a huge movement in our culture to normalize the wrong. And we see that in movies where the use of the person before they have the marriage covenant, they're lying together in relationship. You see that, you hear it in the music, and our young people are very exposed to that, even to the point where it hasn't necessarily been taught at the level that even a lot of adults think it makes sense. We were talking about dating, and dating is a chance to practice these relationships. So practicing chastity as well, but we may not always know the value of chastity unless we read and study and sit with our Lord in these ways, because we've heard that, well, it makes sense that we practice living together to see if it works, but without the avenue of grace, without that sacrament, we don't have the supernatural grace that it takes to have a lifelong marriage. And again, then we're lying with our body, but that's so pervasive in our culture. So I know all of our hopes and desires is to try to help, not by shoving it down our children's throat, but that help them to see that they can look around and they can see what is congruent, what is truth. When they see couples, all of us have friends that have lifelong marriages, that have really good marriages, and our kids are picking that up, and that they understand. And again, So a lot of the training is giving this language to our kids. So, and not in a grasping way, but just they are living that understanding with us. They're looking around. They can see also in the TV shows where it doesn't go well. They see an experience that sometimes divorce does happen, and sometimes children are born outside of wedlock, and all of these things God can redeem, but we see the difficulties and the pain. And so how do we teach our kids to start a relationship so they can have a lifelong marriage, so that grace is flowing within them? is just very important. So when I was reading these texts, I was hoping everybody would sit and read these texts and really sit with it and let the language of the church help teach our children this thing. We stumbled upon being teachers of natural family planning, and I often thank you that I was able to practice that language, so that as my kids became teenagers, they knew that we were practicing chastity in our marriage. So they knew that even as they got older and they understood fertility, desire, loving each other, not using each other, as we had that kind of lived out in our families, then we could trust that they would be looking for that when they would go out in their teenage lives. They would know what was right. And even in my story, where I had situations where I felt used, that was a powerful, or when I felt I used another, that learning is transformative, because you feel it in your body and in your soul. And that's where God allows this. He allows that. He allows the living grace that we need to pull forward. He asks for us to have lifelong marriages, so he gives us the ability to have that through the sacraments. So I also sometimes get where I'm overwhelmed by how awful the culture is, as far as the underlying teachings that my children are grabbing and hearing and listening. And then
they know the truth and they feel completely alone.
Exactly.
That's almost just as bad.
Absolutely. So it was interesting that I was having a conversation really late in the night where I knew my daughter needed to go to sleep, but it was coming.
It's when they all come.
It is true. I mean,
9:30
there's
p.m.
just it's true. It's like the vulnerability is there and it's allowed to come forth. But my daughter is in high school, and she was expressing that she wasn't using these words of. But she was saying that she is experiencing that a lot of people talk about the lack of chastity and they don't even know. She felt a hopelessness that they wouldn't even be able to hear the message. So in her youthfulness, she's 16, she sees it done right, but she's seeing kids all around her not understanding and living a broken way, and it's grieving her to the point where she didn't even know if I should be teaching the class, because what is the purpose? So that's a real desolation. So but then this morning I was listening to another talk, and the podcaster mentioned Maccabees 3, and that it doesn't take the way God works with grace, it takes a small amount of very prayerful parents to turn the culture around, for us to be very sacramental. We don't have to feel like the culture is all against us, or that my daughter feels like all of the people have it wrong at school, because we have the power of the church. And I just really needed to hear that this morning, but also with joy. That's the part I forget. So I needed to hear that. So it's with prayer, sacrifice, joy, night vigils, adoration. God has given us the power and the tools, so we have to fight that feeling of it's overwhelming, because God gives us that. That's what I got.
Yeah. And ever since we started this podcast, we've been using the analogy of this huge burning building, and we're all rushing toward it with like buckets of water, but really we need the fire department to get here with the giant hose.
And we feel like we're taking like cups of water and just being like,
But that's exactly what you're describing. And I think maybe we have to change our visual a little bit with that, and be like, it's not that we need a bigger hose, or we need like the fire department, like the professionals, to come in, right?
Exactly.
Because we can all make a difference. And it goes back to the meaning of that efficacious sign, right? And knowing that, like, it will probably not be these heroic moments where we're saving the cat out of the building, the burning building, right?
or our daughters,
or our
other
daughters.
people's
Okay. I was going to start with the cat. Okay. But it's going to be these small moments on our knees, usually after 9:30 at night. Let's be honest.
Yeah.
And those sacrifices that we make will not go unnoticed. Those actions that they see between our spouses will not go unnoticed. The prayers that we pray for them will not go unheard. And I think that I am one that loves control, and so my immediate reaction with middle school, young teens dating is I immediately go, why? Why would you do that? What's
Yeah.
the purpose?
Right.
No
I
purpose,
know.
don't do it. And so, I'm not getting the best reactions from that age group because they don't believe that they're 13. They believe they're much older than 13. And so now just don't watch YouTube because that makes you think you're older than you really are. Oh, wait. Okay, no, that's not the answer either. Okay, so what do we do? And so I've just started, the language that I have felt like has resonated the most is the language of use. And not even talking about a boy using them. Just talking about what does it mean in general to use someone and pointing out examples because they know when they are using someone and they know when they are being used. And is it for homework? Is it for a sport? Is it it doesn't even have to be in a relationship with a member of the opposite sex that you feel use. And so I have just really that's the little baby step, the little cup of water I'm pouring on the fire right now.
So
is
beneficial.
Just pointing out use. Pointing out when I use someone, when they use someone, and saying, ooh, that didn't feel good, did it? I don't think that's how God designed us. And then also just as much pointing out use, pointing out when they make a gift to themselves. And being wow, you really sacrificed and made a gift of yourself. I had to clean the toilet the other day, and my girls, it was their bathroom, and I was like, you should do it because it's your bathroom. And I came out and I go, oh, I feel so good making a gift of myself. But just incorporating it into your daily language with them of the difference, because here's what resonated when I was having a similar conversation with my niece who's a junior in high school as you were with your daughter. And I said, I don't think the opposite of love is hate. I think the opposite of love is use. And so when your friends are with their boyfriends and they say they're in love, do you think that maybe it's actually use, which is the opposite of love? And she was like, oh, no one's ever explained it like that to me before. Now, and she was like, yeah, if they knew they were being used, they would never want to be used. And I'm like,
There it is.
yeah,
There's the
okay.
language.
And so, and again, I think it's kind of a bomb to drop it on them when they've never heard it in any other circumstance. But I think the more we can incorporate those languages of making a gift of yourself and then being used and using another is a tiny step, right? A tiny step we can take. And so I do love, though, and this is what I think we have to keep reminding ourselves also, is that the last part of Audience 107 in section 7, he states that our culture is really, he says, they're defined, and this was a long time ago, so it has not gotten any better. Our culture is defined by our sexual urge. He says that the man of concupiscence is not completely determined by libido, but that desire is actually meant to lead us out of ourselves and toward self-mastery, which conquers self-centeredness.
Ooh, yeah.
Ooh, okay. So we are being called, not accused, right? Yeah. So let's, instead of saying, oh, boys will be boys, they just can't help themselves, let's give them hope. Let's hold them to a higher standard. And by boys, I mean boys and girls. And let them know that it is possible. Yes. Right? That's what they need to know. And I think we tend especially in our teen years, I do too sometimes, but isolate myself. I'm the only one, that's holding myself to this higher standard, or I'm the only one that's doing the right thing. Everyone around me, I'm never going to find a husband that believes the same thing. And so, just thinking about how self-mastery is possible, chastity is possible. Here are some examples. Here's me living it out with my husband, just like you were saying, Patty. Such a beautiful witness for them to see it is possible.
Yeah.
And I love how John Paul II just randomly ends on this, right? It almost is a little cliffhanger. And then, like, next time we're going to go into the Song of Songs, which, when you really think about it, is hilarious. Like, I still remember, like, when my niece went to, I was first learning about theology of the body. My niece was in middle school. And I was like, it's a love song. Let's read about God's love for us. You know, we're the bride and he's the bridegroom. Let's read about it and fall in love with Jesus. I get to this first page and I'm like, woo, this is too inappropriate. We can't read this. And I was too uncomfortable because it is erotic love poetry. Okay? And let's just talk about the word erotic. First of all, okay, so that word has been stolen from us.
Yes.
And it comes from eros. Remember eros, that deep burning desire inside, right? But when we see erotic on a billboard on the side of the highway, we are not thinking, oh, I'll go to that store for God's deep burning love for me. No, we're like, gross, I'm staying away from that store, right? And so, like, this is, like, the difference. So, like, I was just thinking about, like, what's the difference between reading Song of Songs and reading 50 Shades of Grey? Okay? Both erotic.
Yeah, that is,
Yes.
So, it's love versus use.
Absolutely.
That's the difference. Okay? And so, like, that's kind of the journey that we need to go on now, is recognizing the difference between love versus use, because from the outside they can look the same.
Well
yeah.
said.
Ooh, that. Okay. Okay, I have lots of thoughts. I had nothing, by the way. I literally, once again, wrote, respond to Patty and Katie. Okay, well, I just want to say thank you to both of you, because I feel like I was just soaking in everything that you were saying, and that was super helpful. Like, and for our listeners too, just the great reminder of, like, prayer and the power of prayer and just sitting with the Lord. And if you can get to adoration, I mean, I'm telling you, we've gone through some hard things the last couple of years in our family, and I have felt like a deep desire to be with the Lord more and more. And it's one of those things, like so many things, that, like, once you start doing it, like, the more you do it, the more you want to do it.
Right.
Because
then you get nervous. How am I going to fit this into
because you just realize it's essential, and that you just need that time with Him. And just what a great reminder that, like, when we pray, and we pray something that is part of what God's will, right? Like, His will for our children and all the people that we love is that they would come to know Him, and that they would be united to Him, and know His love. And so if we're praying that, it's gonna happen. It's just a matter of when and, like, the timing and all of that, but it will happen. And so we have to I'm saying this to myself, just continually surrender my children and everything over to Him, knowing that He is perfectly capable, abundantly more capable than me, of, like, caring for them and protecting them, and only allowing the experiences that they need in order to, like, truly have a deeper love for God and that deep prayer life. So thank you for that reminder. And then what I'm hearing you guys talk about too is just the importance of our own witness to our children and to the world. And so that entails just our own personal conversion, right? Like, really allowing the Lord to transform our hearts and living it out, and that makes a huge difference in the world and people seeing that. So I appreciate that too. And then Katie, I think I loved all your thoughts about just, like, how to use that language and, like, every day to talk about love versus use and how to be a gift to each other. And that makes me think about like what kind of conversations I can have with my girls as they enter into relationships. It's like, I wonder, like how you could encourage him today, or like how could you make a gift of yourself. And like, I don't want to talk a lot about my daughters specifically, but I will just say that like one of them was telling me she was interested in this boy, and she was telling me that she's been offering like all her masses for him.
Oh, sweet.
Like before they were even like really talking, he was on her heart, and they have all these conversations about their faith, and like, I don't know. So that gives me a lot of consolation. Like she's really is thinking about like how I can help him to be better, or to know the Lord, or like, that's pretty awesome.
Awesome.
And that is not me, by the way. I mean, I guess we've planted seeds, but I'm telling you, it's the Lord doing all that stuff. It's crazy. But and then there was something else that you said about desire. And like, I think the big question is like, well, you were saying, what's the difference between reading Song of Songs and 50 Shades of Grey? And that is like, okay, well, am I allowing my desire, whatever is being stirred, to point to be an icon, like to all the things I'm reading? Like, is that an icon that points me to God? Like, is it pointing me to Him? Or is it making me close in on myself? Is it leading me to like true communion? Or to a selfish like turning in on myself sort of thing? Does that make sense?
Lots of sense.
So I think that's really the big question that we can ask ourselves when we're thinking about the language of our bodies is like, am I being selfish or not?
Yeah. Beautiful.
That's probably the best examination of conscience we can do.
It's like self-mastery versus self-centeredness.
Right. Yeah. So, wow. So many things to ponder. I think that we're done, though, for this episode. Then, as Katie said, the next 2 episodes, we're going to dive into the Song of Songs. And I am excited for this conversation that we're going to have. And just all the things that God wants to say to us through that beautiful gift of the Song of Songs. So, so get ready for that, everyone.
Get your TOB glasses on.
Get your TOB lenses on. John Paul II is going to help us, thankfully, with that.
Thankfully.
So anyway, know that we are praying for all of you, and please do keep us in your prayers as well as we are learning how to live this life and to walk with the Lord. So, but until the next episode, God bless.
Thank you so much for listening. If you have questions or comments, we would love to hear from you. We can be reached by email at befilledpodcast@gmail.com. You can also find us on social media. We are on Facebook and Instagram. There you can find additional encouragement in between episodes. Also, be sure to check out our show description for links to resources we discuss in the show, as well as questions for deeper reflection. Until the next episode, God bless.